Welcome to Facing the Nation. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us again this week. Today, a partnership for national unity. The partnership is really concerned that the current Home Affairs Minister, Mr. Clement Rohi, seem a bit unbothered by what the partnership and, of course, the Guyana Police Force are calling a rise in serious crimes. Of course, with me to discuss that issue and to put their position out there once again, of course, this is not the first, the second, or the third time that the partnership is raising concerns about crime or crime situation in Guyana, but it's an ongoing thing because the more we talk, it seems as though, in terms of crime, the crime rate, especially serious crimes, they are not reducing. With me to discuss that, currently on the panel is former police commissioner and, of course, current APNU member of parliament and shadow minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Winston Felix. We will be joined later by the person who we like to call one of our security experts, Brigadier himself. But for now, I introduce you to Mr. Felix, or I should say reintroduce you to Winston Felix. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Malika. Happy to be on your program.
All right. I know usually you expect a clip from us, but we don't have a clip today. It's just straight discussion. We're just talking serious crimes. And of course, as always, later on in the program, I'll open up the lines, the telephone lines, so that you can call in your views and, of course, pose your questions. I must ask this. One of the most alarming things in the statement coming from a Partnership for National Unity this week is Guyana's murder rate is 3 times higher than that of the United States. Is that really so? Because when you think of the United States and you think of Guyana, you're talking about a country that it's probably physically a dot compared to the United States. Is that really so?
It is compared, the murder rate is compared based on a per capita per 100. Right? So that the number of murders in the United States, by the same measurement, would be less than Guyana per 100 of persons per population.
Okay.
And that is how it is not measured by the number of murders in the United States per se.
Okay.
All right? So that if you say United States has 3,000 murders per year, that 3,000 per year is measured per capita per 100 persons of the population.
All right. Thank you.
And that is really comparison with Guyana having a much smaller population, but a higher number of murders per 100.
Okay, all right, great. And of course, at this time, we welcome the leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the opposition, Brigadier the Honorable David Granger. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right, great to have you. Now, Brigadier, of course, Mr. Felix would have read a statement that the Partnership for National Unity would have issued to the media and to the general public today regarding your concerns about the increase in serious crimes. And one of the things that came out of that statement is that, okay, if I can just read it quickly, blame for Guyana's high murder rate lies squarely within the nearly 22-year-old long People's Progressive Party civic administration. Can we really blame not only the murder rate, but crimes in general? Can we lay the blame at the feet of the government? Is that fair? Is it fair to do that?
Well, it is very fair. It is necessary to ensure that responsibility for public security is placed at the feet of the administration. The government has a responsibility to protect, what is called R2P, responsibility to protect. And what we've seen over the last 2 decades or more is that the government has failed to fulfill that responsibility, A, by ensuring that the law enforcement agency, particularly the Guyana Police Force, is strengthened, and B, that every effort is made to prevent crime. Now, in terms of crime prevention, we have had, over the last 15 years, over 15 major interventions from overseas alone, most of them from the British. But the government has failed to implement those interventions, and there are reasonable recommendations. I myself participated in a local one called the Disciplined Forces Commission, and we were confident that if all of those recommendations were implemented, we would not have the crime situation that we have today. So that is a failure of the government. And secondly, we know that in this age, many of the most serious crimes are transnational in character, which means that the crimes are imported from other countries across our borders. For example, narco trafficking. We don't produce cocaine here, but we have a cocaine problem. We don't manufacture guns here, but we have a gun running problem. These guns, these drugs come over the border. That's why we call them transnational. So it is the government's responsibility to ensure that its population is protected from the ravages of these crimes. But because it is not implementing the correct policy, we continue to suffer.
Let's talk about what seems to be the minister's silence, especially according to your partnership too. What seems to be the minister's silence on the increase in serious crimes? Should the minister come to the National Assembly either with a motion or with a simple presentation to talk about serious crimes? Would you indulge him? Would you listen? And I'm asking too because your partnership would have continued to call for his resignation. So would you listen to him?
Well, we have come to the conclusion that the minister has been there for 8 years. He's been there for, he's appointed in 2006. So at this point in time, we have more or less come to the conclusion it's a waste of time listening to him, because we have tried every means, making recommendations, examining the budget, making proposals, and he himself has set up numerous agencies, but we have pointed out over and over again that some of these agencies are not fulfilling the heavy task of law enforcement and crime prevention. Now, let us say, for example, in Guyana, he sets up the neighborhood policing or community supporting groups or citizen security programs. These are all good, well and good. They're necessary, but they're not sufficient. They are not sufficient. What we need is a basis of a strong, well-trained, regular police force. And then you can add community policing, you can add neighborhood policing, but the heart of law enforcement is a strong police force. That police force has to be brought up to strength in terms of its manpower. It has to be well-trained. That is to say, the training must be reviewed and revised as the time goes by, because we now have transnational crimes to deal with. You need a different caliber policeman. People need to be well paid. They need to be to enjoy a very high level of morale, because right now there's some evidence that they've been demoralized. They need to be given the equipment. Now, this is a big country by Caribbean standards, and an area like the Cuyuni-Mazruni alone is bigger than the Netherlands. Now, if you're going to have a police headquarters, police regional or divisional headquarters, we have been insisting in APNU that at least the commander should be based in the region. We have a situation in which the commander is still based in Ivlery. Can you have a commander of the Berbice division living in Georgetown? Can you have a commander of the Essequibo division living in Georgetown? Why should you have the commander of that huge hinterland, what they call F division, living in Georgetown? So over the years, Partnership for National Unity has been making numerous recommendations, and the government has failed to implement those recommendations. The British have been making recommendations. The government has failed to introduce those recommendations. Even the National Drug Strategy Master Plan, and we pointed out over and over again that narco-trafficking is the mother of all crimes. Once you have narco-trafficking, you're going to have gun running, you're going to have other forms of contraband, you're going to have execution murders, you're going to have armed robberies, and we feel that there must be a National Drug Strategy Master Plan. There's none. It expired 5 years ago. So who can I blame? I have to blame the government. I have to blame the Minister of Home Affairs, who is more concerned now with forthcoming elections than with keeping Guyanese safe.
Before I come back to MP Felix on some of the specifics regarding the rise in serious crimes, Brigadier, have you lately not seen some sort of commitment, a further commitment from the Guyana Police Force in terms of crime fighting and the masking, as in relating it to the project that has been set up in All Boys Town, and then there was one recently set up in Agricola? Is this not a sign that maybe the Guyana Police Force is improving?
The Guyana Police Force is improving its public relations. It is not improving law enforcement. The All Boys Impact program, I don't have any problem with a program like that in normal times. But we have abnormal times, we are experiencing abnormal times, and what we pointed out is that there are certain root causes of criminality. And those root causes are not necessarily present in All Boys Town alone. A, I'm against the profiling of a single community. And B, we don't only have to tackle crime, we have to tackle the causes of crime. And when we look at big criminality, we're looking at money laundering, we're looking at cocaine trafficking, we're looking at trafficking in persons, we're looking at contraband smuggling, we're looking at gun running. These are not crimes that are typical of the average person in All Boys Town. Maybe they have an impact in All Boys Town. They also have an impact in Georgetown. If you look at the murder rates, you will see that about 17 of the 58 murders committed this year so far are in hinterland. So what is the point having an All Boys Town impact project, when in fact it does not prevent the murderous crimes that are taking place elsewhere? So I feel that that program is misplaced. This is not a time for it. Maybe in normal times you can have football and volleyball, and you can have computer programs and so on. Right now, we need a serious police force that is concerned about law enforcement, the prevention of murders, and in doing so, it must ensure that drug trafficking is brought under control. Once you have drug trafficking, you're going to have execution murders, you're going to have gun crimes, you're going to have 3 armed robberies a day. This is what we experience at present. So, All Boys Town Impact Project, yes, but that is not going to solve the problem. It is not dealing with causation. And we now are at a stage in Guyana in which we have to deal with causation. What is causing these murders? What is causing this high rate of armed robberies? And when we answer those questions, we will design a police force. We'll give them the finance, we'll give them the equipment, we'll give them the aircraft, we'll give them the boats to patrol along the coast. We'll give them the all-terrain vehicles, we'll bring them up to manpower, we'll pay them properly. And you'll see the change. But the People's Progressive Party is not interested in those interventions.
Okay, all right. Former Police Commissioner Felix, now Brigadier talked about what the Guyana Police Force really and truly should be doing at this point in time. But were you the police commissioner right now in this present time? The resources that were spent, of course, the financial resources and human resources, and of course the time that was spent in setting up the All Boys Town project and the agricultural one, what would you have done with the monies and the time and the human resources for those projects instead?
Now, I am always an advocate of strengthening the hardcore law enforcement areas, the Criminal Investigations Department, traffic, police, public relations. Now, the president spoke about an avalanche of crimes when he was addressing the issues of dismissal of cases. When a case is dismissed, you have to go back from the investigation, the start of the investigation, right through to the courtroom appearances. Mm-hmm. And these are the areas where you examine and discover the weaknesses in the case, whether the case was weak during the investigation. So I'm saying to you that unless those areas which have been depleted are strengthened, the investigation of cases will have serious question marks on them. And then you go to the courtroom and you look at the prosecutorial aspects of the case, and then again you will determine whether the investigation had an impact on the dismissal of the cases or whether it was naked police indiscipline, which has been the cause of many dismissals. So that is one area which must be addressed, because at the end of the day, the leader of the opposition spoke about all those causations of crime. We must ensure that when the case is made, when a drug trafficking case is made, that case is not dismissed, because each dismissal of case strikes at the root of public confidence. It's not one issue, not just the dismissal of the case you're dealing with. You're dealing with a whole other range of issues. You talk about a murder case being, or for last year at least, or early this year, 3 murder cases were dismissed. that goes to the root of public confidence. So we have to train the police force and give them, I'm just dealing here with the criminal investigations department. The money could have been put there. You could also put money into drug trafficking, because drug trafficking is a serious issue in this country. And as such, we need to be able to interdict drugs as it enters the country. That is not happening. And once, to the extent that that is not happening, internally, we have a difficulty discovering where that drug goes when it comes in. And we only find them in the main when they're going out through the airport or when they're discovered outside. And so with the now introduction of the DA office here, I think that more investigative work, collaborative investigative work would be done to turn up what we don't know about in Guyana. I'm not saying they're going to solve all our problems, but at least if they focus on a particular case, we might be able to get better results.
But why do you believe that the new office setup, the DEA office, would get the support of, because I'm thinking it's necessary, would get the support of the Ministry of Home Affairs? If without that office, the Ministry of Home Affairs seem not to be helping the crime situation, why do you believe they'll get the support now?
Well, here is a collaboration between Guyana Police Force and the DEA. The DEA is not dependent on the Ministry of Home Affairs for resources. The Guyana Police Force is. And I can tell you that they would generate their own sources and develop their own information and operations that would involve the Guyana Police Force. And in over 90% of the cases, it's not that they get things wrong. Don't misunderstand me that all is perfect with the DEA. But I think it would strengthen our efforts here at turning up what we don't know and targeting what we don't know and striking at them at appropriate times. That is what is important. Because we don't discover anything here. Do we? When last have we, apart from a kilogram or 5 kilograms or a 10 kilogram, what has happened to the big sacks, the 50 pounds and the 200 pounds? We don't find them. We found some the other day in the lumber cocaine in tree trunk. Mm-hmm. But that was a case that was badly handled and could have gone nowhere from day one. So I'm saying to you that money, I am all for the strengthening the investigative arm. It is depleted and much more need to be done to build investigators, for murders, for frauds. This is one of the weakest areas in the Guyana Police Force now. Murders and frauds.
If I could add to what my colleague has been saying, we should not underestimate the importance of the careful selection and training of personnel. We are now in an era of transnational crime, and you need more highly educated persons, and the officers must be better educated as well. So the selection and training of personnel are very important elements, and when we have a police force that is 20% on the strength, you're begging for trouble. The second thing is that transnational crime cannot be solved purely with national resources. And the DEA, as my colleague has said, is bringing a transnational network. So when a person leaves one jurisdiction, or when a cargo leaves one jurisdiction, I mean, you need to have an international agency which tracks that vessel. If it leaves Panama, it goes to Curacao, it goes to Barbados, it comes here. And that international network would help to track vessels coming in and leaving Guyana. For example, cocaine from Guyana has ended up in Malaysia, it's ended up in Mozambique, it's ended up all around the world. So we need the outreach, the reach of the DEA to be able to detect where the drugs are coming from, where they're going to, and where the network is. But everything comes down to personnel and, of course, technology. Nowadays, we need modern technology because we cannot track those vessels with the resources we have. Finally, you need honest policemen. They have to be well paid, they have to be well educated. It's not a dream, but I am confident that many Guyanese police officers I've met would like to do a good job. And I remember there was a very bad time in our country's history when professional police officers were being prevented from doing their jobs because we had certain politicians who were intruding, telling them what to do, when to do it, when not to do it, where to appear. And as a result of that, the force was demoralized because they were on the brink of cracking a crime or arresting someone. But the political people who interfered with their performance prevented them from so doing. And as a result of that, for the first time in our history, we had to have a presidential commission of inquiry into the conduct of a particular Minister of Home Affairs.
But Brigadier, some may argue that's highly likely still happening, especially given the Linden Commission of Inquiry we had. People may say that politicians may still be interfering in the work of police officers.
Well, as I do feel that once you have a large number of well-trained professional police officers, the possibility of political interference would be reduced. It cannot be eliminated completely, but it would be reduced if you have a group of professional officers saying, I'm not going to do that because it's illegal. But there have been cases in which poorly paid officers have been susceptible to bribes, have been susceptible to being paid money to graft, to corruption. But one of the ways to prevent it is to ensure that the officers are well trained and well paid. But if you keep paying officers peanuts, you're going to get problems, and that is part of the problem.
All right. MP Felix, now earlier you talked about there being three murder cases that were dismissed earlier this year. I'm going to talk specifically about the two that I don't think any Guyanese, even the ones living here and the ones living overseas, will ever forget. That's the one where the cricketer murdered his friend. That was caught on camera and it went worldwide. And then we had this situation where the biker admitted to killing his fellow biker, and he turned himself in, but yet months after we see them walking free. Are you saying in cases like those that the possibility exists that it was a lack of training of some police officers? That's the reason those cases were dismissed? Is that possible?
Well, let me add the third one. Damien Belgrave outside the fish shop.
Mm-hmm.
In his case, my view is the investigation went wrong from the beginning. Because if three men are armed on a patrol and one fired, there are processes which would lead you to determine which firearm was fired and which shooter used that firearm. So for the reason proffered by the police for the dismissal of that case, I see it as bungling from within. The bikers story, that was on availability of witnesses, and I think biker and the one in by Starbuck by Border Market.
Yeah, the cricketer.
Good. The cricketer. My view is that the days for warning witnesses are long gone. Witnesses ought to be summoned. There are many advantages open to the prosecutor for summoning of witnesses to attend court. When a witness is summoned and he or she doesn't appear, the prosecutor, once he can prove that there was service of that summons, can apply for an arrest warrant. You can't do that if the witness is told.
Oh.
Right? And so that's what I'm saying. These things handcuff the prosecutor. I mean, a lot of blame go on the prosecutor, but he can't make a case that was not properly prepared. Or he can't stand in court and make arrangements that should have been made before he gets the file.
But currently, is it a part of the law that you have to warn a witness before you...
It is not, that part is not law.
Okay.
Summoning the witness is law. Summoning the witness, serving him with a witness summons. And then there are forms to report to the court, affidavit or return of service, that this summons was served in this manner.
All right.
So those cases, all 3 cases, the police has to take some stick for the dismissal of those cases, because proper procedures weren't followed, whether it is the biker, cricketer, or whether it is Damian Belgrave. That is they're clearly false on this side.
I know we're not discussing those cases specifically.
No, I know, but they impact heavily on police efficiency, because people come to the police as the vehicle to get justice at the courts.
Mm-hmm.
And when this is not done, you shake public confidence.
But no, so my question is, as it stands, if evidence and the police pull themselves together and present evidence, could those cases still be reopened?
Once you have not pleaded to a charge, these indictable charges, once they have not pleaded to the charge, the cases can be brought back.
All right.
Once they have pleaded, then they can plea that they have already been tried.
Okay. Let's talk about a specific when it comes to, I think the public is being told that it should reduce the incidence of crime, this stop and search campaign, because some people have been complaining. Is that in any way designed to reduce crime?
Well, I can tell you it is a useful law enforcement technique, which I think it is Section 19 of the Police Act, gives the police the power to stop, search, and detain. Mm-hmm. But it has to be done, for it to be useful to the organization. It has to be done rationally, okay? And I know of its usefulness in terms of targeting suspicious-looking persons or vehicles. And you find either stolen items or unlicensed firearms, but you have to use it properly. It is covered by law, but if you don't use it properly, you irritate the public, whom you should be protecting and serving.
Yeah, I think that's happening in some cases now. Brigadier, there is this ongoing conversation, especially when there seems to be, when there's this increase in serious crimes, especially murders. There is a conversation that comes up on our social network. Somebody's going to say something talking against the government and against the Guyana police force, and then somebody's going to defend it by saying, but for example, what about Trinidad? Their crime rate is high, their murder rate is high. How, I mean, I know you've responded to this question on a previous discussion, but how do you justify that, saying because Trinidad's crime rate is high, then we should accept it here in Guyana? What are your thoughts on that?
Crimes internationally are rated on a per capita basis, and the Trinidadian population is twice the size of Guyana. So although it may seem to be a large number, actually when it is reduced to the murder rate per 100,000 of the population, it is lower than Guyana's. Guyana is among the top 4 in the hemisphere, higher than United States, higher than Canada, you know. So comparing with Trinidad is not necessarily useful, because Guyana's murder rate is higher than Trinidad's murder rate. There are other factors which we need to consider, and one of them is, of course, that I'm not terribly concerned about Trinidad, I'm concerned about Guyana. The fact is that our poverty level is such that we are losing valuable members of our community through murder, but most important, we're chasing away talented people, and we're scaring investors who want to come into the country. But in Trinidad, it is not so bad, because many people are still prepared to go investing in Trinidad, because Trinidad has rich hydrocarbon resources. It has, petroleum, it has natural gas, and it has a rich manufacturing culture, rich manufacturing industry. So people are still prepared to go invest in Trinidad, but Guyana is a poor country without some of those resources. So people who have capital to invest would make a choice. Should I go into a country where there's a high rate of piracy, a high level of banditry, high rate of gun crimes, 3 armed robberies every day, cocaine trafficking, or should I put my money into a safer place, such as Trinidad or Barbados or Antigua? And that is a consideration people make. Let me tell you something. Years ago, under this very PPP administration, a huge company, came into this country and to set up an enterprise. And they brought, of course, many of the directors and so on were foreigners. But when they examined the situation in Guyana, they put their families to live in Trinidad. So every weekend, the directors would fly out of Guyana to go to Trinidad to be with their families, just as if their families were living in New Amsterdam. You know, they travel out of the country and come back here on Monday morning to do their work. It is so bad. But the point I'm making is that we ought not to compare Guyana with those countries, because Guyana is losing massively. And when we look at the census reports, we will see that the population is falling largely because migration is rising. Migration is rising largely because of the high level of crime, particularly violent crime, murders and armed robberies.
Okay, all right. Viewers, I'll open up the phone lines in a moment or two. Remember, we're talking about crime today, the security sector, and of course, the Guyana Police Force. So you can call and pose your questions on those matters. But gentlemen, before I go to the phone lines, both of you, of course, beginning with MP Felix. The Guyana Police Force is at this present time in the period of celebrating 175 years of existence. In addition to all that you've said thus far, what would you like to see police officers take away from this celebration and everything else that is going to be happening for the 175th anniversary?
The capacity to serve the public much more efficiently, which is an issue of government's lack of strong support for the police, providing them with the resources they need, the training that they so badly are in need of, looking generally at the satisfiers within the police force. Issues like pay, issues Brigadier mentioned, recruitment is essential. With the changing face of crime, the society looks more towards the West. We're copying cultures. And so crime, for example, computer crimes, would need a certain type of training which wasn't hitherto available to the police. What happens when computers are hacked and money are stolen from accounts? How would the police deal with these matters? So I'm saying that the police got to be given capacity, and this capacity can only be developed through stronger input from the government, which has the police force now like a weakened tiger. You know, they can do so much but no more. They are not moving in step with the times. Okay, you're bringing computers, you're giving them. What happens if tomorrow, with people, we now have companies offering you online service? What happens when the hacking starts and money is stolen from this account here and moves to that account there and so on? Who has to investigate that? It will be reported to the police, yes, but we have a different sort of crime now to investigate. So generally, I'm looking for capacity building within the police force, and the government must understand that it must sustain the capacity building because things keep changing all the time.
Brigadier?
If I can add to what my colleague has said about this particular matter, most Guyanese are now aware for the first time of the need to revise the Anti-Money Laundering and Countering Financing of Terrorism Act. Now, many don't know that we've had the law on our books for 14 years, since year 2000. But there has not been a single prosecution. Guyanese would find it hard to believe that the police force was not really equipped to deal with anti-money laundering and countering the finance of terrorism. It was only in November 2013, just 8 months ago, that the head of the Presidential Secretariat announced the establishment of SOCU, the Special Organized Crime Unit. In other words, for nearly 14 years, the government knew very well it did not have the capability to investigate money laundering. And that is one of the new crimes because of narco trafficking, because of gold and diamond smuggling. You need a different type, a better qualified police officer who will be able to get into the accounts, who will be able to get into the cambios, get into the casinos, get into the revenue system to see how money is being laundered. So the police force is critical. And one of the reasons for non-prosecution is there was no investigative arm of the Guyana police force, which was capable of doing this type of investigation. So the FIU was there. It is not a law enforcement unit. The police force had no SOCU. The Director of Public Prosecution cannot do it. The Bank of Guyana cannot do it. So it is only when APNU started to put pressure on the government and demand reform of the anti-money laundering law that suddenly the government of Guyana came up with this SOCU. But that is just one indicator of the direction that modern crimes are traveling in, so that we need to ensure that the police force is trained to keep abreast with modern criminality.
Yeah, coming out of this conversation is the fact that the Guyana police force needs improvement. But before we begin to wrap up, MP Felix, what is the most modern functioning section, whether it be section or department, of the Guyana police force at this time? I don't know if you're in a position to say what's the most modern department.
Well, that would be a difficult question. What I do know, having left over 8 years ago, or just approaching 8 years now, is that the entire force needs overhauling. It needs improved training, improved management, improved leadership right across the board. I won't rate any section above any other section because to me they're all flat, and I don't think the Guyana police force with its present leadership, with its present makeup, is truly staffed and managed to deal with the issues of the day. Worse yet, they get no proper political guidance from the Minister of Home Affairs, who we say should go. Roy should have gone already. Roy has no clue as to the demands of his office in relation to law enforcement. And I think that's the worst problem the force has to deal with. They are saddled with a minister who is clueless, he's blind, among all the other ailments he suffers from. He doesn't know in which direction to go. So every appearance, Monday morning, look for another set of comedy on his press conference.
If we can add to what Winston has said, we always have to bear in mind that Guyana is not a little Caribbean island. It is a very large country. And when we speak of law enforcement, we don't only speak about all Boys Town or Plaisance or Beirut. We speak about a very large country in relation to our population. The police force needs, most of all, information, because it has to prevent crime. It has to know, it has to be in the right place at the right time. If that crime is one of smuggling, if that crime is one of murder, of armed robberies, whatever the nature of the crime, it needs information, and that information has to be passed, transmitted very, very quickly, which requires all police stations to be computerized. So that if somebody passes, well, dad, committing some offense or something like that, by the time he reaches Parandam or some other police station along the coast, the information could be transmitted, right? We can't use smoke signals nowadays. We have to use computers. I don't know to what extent all of the police stations have to be have been computerized. The second thing is that the police force needs to be able to analyze Now, when you see trends like murder, which we started speaking about, the murder rate today is the same as it was 10 years ago when a man called Fineman Rollins was alive and shooting. That means in the worst days of the Troubles, when we had a high murder rate, it virtually is the same today. Which means that somebody is not analyzing why we have so many murders. We didn't have murders because of Rollins, we had murders because of narco trafficking. And to my mind, the causes of the murders and the executions and the violence then are similar to the causes now. So it is not a matter of going and killing a fine man or killing a skinny. The question is solving the causes, find out what the causes of crime are. And unless we have analysts in the police force, we will not be able to detect that. Similarly, there are other things like suicide and so on, but unless people analyze, we will not be able to bring this to an end. And of course, we must have the resources to detect. That is, we need forensic resources, we need laboratories. Even now, there's a crime which is very frequently ignored, the crime of arson. But the Guyana Fire Service does not have the resources to analyze all of the materials they get from a fire scene. They could pass those materials to the police, but the police as well does not have the facilities to do the analysis. So we need to have modern laboratory, modern technicians, modern trained officers who can do all of these things. Policing is vital to the progress of this country, to the stability of this country. And we are not going to attract investors. We're not going to have a happy population. We're not going to be able to keep Guyanese graduates right here in this country unless we solve this crime problem. It is not a cosmetic matter, just paying more salaries. There must be a holistic approach. I do believe that after 22 years, the PPP administration has been given enough assistance, even by people they malign at the National Day celebration. They've been given enough assistance and they've been given enough information and advice to enable this country to be much safer. But the People's Progressive Party has scorned much of that advice, and that's why we're where we are today.
Thank you very much, sir. Of course, this has been Facing the Nation. I was chatting with former Police Commissioner, APNU Member of Parliament, and the Shadow Minister of Home Affairs, Mr. Winston Felix, and leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the opposition, Brigadier the Honorable David Granger. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us. Be good Guyanese citizens. Take care of yourselves and each other. Goodbye.